Hey everyone, I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today, and we're excited to bring you another in our series of interviews with top leaders in health IT. And our guest is Mark Christensen. He's CEO at Xelex.ai. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, John. Good to be here.
Yeah, excited for this discussion. I think you're riding the interesting wave of AI, but from a very different angle than I think we've had before. But before we dive into some of those topics, tell us a little bit about yourself and Xelex.ai.
Yeah, sure. As you mentioned, I'm the CEO and I'm also a co-founder of Xelex.ai. We're a training data services provider. We're working in audio and text, and our clients are typically the data science team at technology companies building and refining their own models or models for clients. The verticals we work in are primarily healthcare, business intelligence for contact center applications, and consumer experience applications and for consumer experience companies. Our sweet spot, though, or our area of domain expertise is healthcare. We acquired that expertise through WebChartMD. It's a platform that's used by or has been used by over 40,000 healthcare providers over the last 17 years to manage their
Wow.
clinical documentation workflow. So, yeah, that's a big part of our DNA, and we have a rich history in healthcare.
Interesting. Well, I think that is such a unique background, and yeah, everyone said, "What's going to happen to transcription companies?" This is an interesting, evolution of your company because you have a certain skill set that's needed by these AI companies. So, talk to us a little bit about, what kind of healthcare projects need the quality training data that you're able to provide organizations.
Yeah, in our area of audio and text, of course, one of the biggest ones these days, and I know you're a fan of this technology, is ambient listening and clinical summarization. And there are a lot of different projects surrounding that technology that technology companies need quality data, training data in. Utterance collection is one of them. For medical terminology, text
Mhm.
classification is another one. And in text classification projects, we define classes or categories of content within text. Of course, hallucination identification is a big one, where we help define the types of errors the model is making. Transcript summarization is another big one, where we help the model understand the medical significance of content. So those are a couple of the key project types that data science teams need quality training data for.
Interesting. So when you talk about the training data, is Zalex creating the training data and providing them this dump of data that you have maybe from WebChatMD or something, some other source? Or are you taking other people's data and cleaning it up and making it more valuable for them?
Yeah, we don't offer training data sets. What we do is we curate and enhance the raw data of our clients. And an example would be another project type called abstract summarization, where the client will give us verbatim transcripts of exam room conversations. And then our job is to take those and summarize them. And those summaries then become the training data content used to train the model. So that's one example. We anticipate moving into data creation, though. I could see that happening in the future because I feel like there's such a need for it. Synthetic office visits is, for example, one area where I envision us creating training data in the future.
Interesting. I mean, the synthetic data one's an interesting one. Do you think that would be effective at the training data that your clients are requesting? It's interesting. You could almost create synthetic data off all the WebChart MD ones. Since I mean, there's obviously licensing, interesting questions there. But do you think synthetic data is going to be a solution to the problem of training data?
Well, what we've seen now, having processed thousands and thousands of office visit recordings, is that a lot of times there's specific data objectives that, live exam room conversations, they're spontaneous, they're not scripted, and so they're really not designed to accomplish certain objectives. And there's a long list of things that I could see needing to be trained as kind of subtasks in clinical summarization, different disease and condition specialties, tighter demographic controls, you know, visit types that you want to drill down into, exam room conversation, for instrumentation or for specific imaging and lab content. Those are the kind of things you just may not be able to capture from a live data set as effectively as you might be able to from synthetic data of those conversations.
That's interesting. So talk to us about what it takes to get good training data. How does it work with your clients, and how does that process kind of evolve? Do you start with just the transcription and involve, like talk to us about what it takes. What's the effort involved in taking raw data, if you will, and making it more useful for them?
Yeah, it's a very relevant question because it's the number one issue most often cited by data science teams, and that's getting good data. Because once the training data needs are too large to be created in-house, where your own team is going to create a gold standard, then it introduces all kinds of variables that are outside of your control as a data science team. And there are a lot of things we could talk about on this one. I think the one that for me is one of the key drivers is getting good talent. Because in healthcare, so much of project success hinges on the annotator. It's at the individual annotator level where success occurs. And for us, having used hundreds and hundreds of annotators on projects, making sure the annotator's level of expertise is correctly aligned with project requirements is just an absolute must. And something we've had to learn the hard way and really be able to learn how to do effectively, and we've become successful at it. But it's really true in healthcare, maybe more so than in other kind of verticals and project types, because so many healthcare projects are really labor intensive. And because of that, they can be very expensive. It's not like sentiment analysis kind of projects, where an annotator might spend, 15 seconds to a minute annotating a file. In healthcare, for some projects, it can take an hour or more to annotate a single file. Then you route that through QA for another 30 to 45 minutes. And, it might be part of a multi-stage workflow, where by the time you're done with it, you could have 2 or 3 hours of work effort attached to a single file, and you're annotating hundreds, if not thousands, of files. So, you can see how it adds up, cost-wise and work effort-wise. You got to get it right. I was talking to a coworker. We're launching a project today, and I was speaking with one of my coworkers yesterday about just how much energy it takes to get annotators to the point where they're proficient enough to process a file and work on a project with the high enough level of accuracy that we need. And that level of just one other thought on that level of expertise changes. It changes with the project. It changes even with the stage of the project. So getting the right talent aligned is something you got to do right at the beginning of the project. And then it's something you have to keep doing right to make sure that the data is good, even as the project evolves. So that's the long, that's one of the issues we deal with a lot. So I got a lot of passion and energy for that particular driver.
Well, it seems like that's maybe a myth you're dispelling right now, because I think for most of us, especially tech people like me, I'm literally tech guy, right? We look at it and we say, well, they're just taking the data, they're having the machine learning, the AI models look at the data. They don't think about humans in the background making the data higher quality. So, why can't the technology just do what the annotators are doing? Help us understand how much higher quality it is from an annotator. I mean, you even use clinicians. Talk to us about when you'd use a clinician versus someone else to do the annotation, and how that quality is different than what just a machine learning algorithm with some computer vision and AI, applied to it can do.
Yeah, that's a great point. And what happens is, as new models are created, it has to be fed a large volume of manually annotated data. The same in text and audio as it is with imaging and video at the start. As the model evolves, then there's an opportunity to add more semi-supervised data training into the workflow. But at the launch, and in healthcare, where so much of the data annotation is so bespoke and requires so much interpretation, it's beyond the scope of models to do it. And you mentioned clinicians. We do use clinicians for projects, not exclusively, but we use them because they're so good at, not always, but frequently, they're so good at interpreting ambiguous content. Healthcare models have to learn on a lot of ambiguous content, and that has to be correctly annotated in order to train the model successfully.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that makes sense when you talk about clinicians and what clinicians can bring to it, because if you or I were to look at data, doctors look at it very differently, right? Because there's more context that they have for what the data really means. So I think that makes sense that you use clinicians. But my question is, how do you get clinicians to come and annotate and clean data? That doesn't sound like a job that a clinician wants. Talk to us about that process, because if I'm an AI company trying to get clinicians to come do data cleaning, that's hard. That seems like a hard task.
Well, yeah, how do we get them? I mean, the first thing is you have to pay a lot.
Mm.
That's especially if they're US based clinicians. That just goes with the territory.
Uh-huh.
And why would a clinician work on a project? It varies really by the clinician. Some are technology geeks. They love AI, they love technology, and they want to be part of the transformation that's happening right now in healthcare, clinical documentation, especially with the use of AI. Other times they're in between jobs. Sometimes they're medical residents and they're looking for another income source that fits their schedule. Um, so it does vary. But as you said, clinicians really help us produce the level of gold standard data that we need for the projects we do. And not exclusively clinicians. I mean, we have medical terminologists that work with us. We have medical language specialists. And they do a great job as well, many of them. And when they don't, through our quality assurance, we have to weed them out and not use them on projects. But yeah, we've got a solid team of clinicians and other medical language experts that work with us. But despite that, I mean, the reality is there's a constant um, flow of new people that are being vetted because we have to keep the pipeline filled, because oftentimes projects require a substantial workforce, and we have to make sure that we've got people that are equipped to do that.
Yeah, seems like that's the secret sauce, is vetting the right ones that do effective work. That makes sense. So talk to us about some of the examples of how you're cleaning data. Like, obviously, we all understand transcription, we understand some of the basic concepts, but help us understand, like, what are you being requested by your clients to do to enhance the quality and really the value of the data to make it more meaningful for their AI models?
Yeah, yeah. Examples of how we're cleaning data, again, vary by project and do vary even by the stage of the project. But I can give you a couple of examples. Um, One task we do with large language model training is creating summary statements that are factually correct. I mean, that's an important thing to mention, the factual correctness.
Yeah, AI can't guarantee that, but a human can.
Yeah, and even with that, even with experts doing the work, it sounds easy to do, or it sounds like something we could tightly define and control through guidelines and training. But the truth is, it's a lot trickier than you might think. Um, and the reason is, exam room conversations are often, they're very disjointed. They're not scripted. And even straightforward things like a chief complaint, for example,
Hmm.
which you think would be an easy one,
Yeah.
they're not always explicitly stated. So it involves accurate interpretation and summarization and a skill level to do that. I mean, I'll give you another example while we're talking about the types of hows, and that's content grouping. Content
What's
grouping
that?
means, well, it's when you're training the model and you're reviewing the conversation between the patient and the provider, but maybe there's subjective content that's discussed at the end of the conversation, not neatly, wrapped into the top where you'd expect it to occur. And the annotator has to have the skill to see that and realize what's happening, even if it's kind of subtly stated, and then group it back up at the top of the summary with the like conversational content for the sake of training the model. One, these are topics I love talking about. I'll mention one other if we have time, and
Yeah.
that has to do with flow and cohesiveness. Other tasks that we have to do, um, those are those can be extremely difficult, and it's because you need to be able to write your summary statements in a way that allows them to flow and have the cohesiveness so that they sound like the clinician wrote them.
Mm.
And that type of ability takes a lot of training and it takes a lot of skill to be able to do.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, that's a lot of different things I wouldn't have thought about. The needing to be able to train the AI is all of these, not just factual correctness, like content grouping, as you talked about. How does that process kind of evolve with your clients? Like, what do you see kind of changing? Does it start off with give me transcription and then move to, or what's the process with your clients usually?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for some projects have a fixed timeline and tightly defined objectives, and they're kind of a one and done. And we close out that project, and that's the end of it. But the more exciting projects for us as a team are the ones where, as you're kind of describing, the model evolves and the process itself evolves. Um, and we love those kind of projects
Mm.
because those are the kind of projects that it's going to sound chaotic, and there is some chaos in it, but it's a very interesting, exciting level of chaos where we're required to make rapid changes to guidelines, to quickly retrain annotators, to quickly retool the platform for the new configuration to support the new iteration of the project. And sometimes when we're in the midst of a project that's iterating, the science team will reach out to us in the morning with with a new direction that they want to try. And we'll rewrite, retrain, and retool all within a day and be
Wow.
ready to launch into the new iteration by the end of the day. And for us, that gets to the heart of what we love to do and why we're in this business as service providers, because our job is to make the data science team look good.
Mm.
That's what we want to do. We excel at providing the team with the quality of data that they need to meet their project objectives. Um, and I think, yeah, there probably is nothing more exciting for us as a team than to be able to support the data science team in that way.
I mean, it makes sense, right? Because this AI effort that we're experiencing across all of healthcare is really one of discovery, right? And so, like, to assume that you could just do it once and then be, I'm sure these AI teams, the data science teams, are discovering, like, oh wait, if we just had this data, we could do more. Is that kind of what prompts it usually? Is they test, with the data you sent, and then they realize, ooh, there's a gap here.
Well, as the service provider, we don't get to really see into
Yeah,
the
they don't tell
process
you,
that
huh?
closely,
Makes
but
sense.
we surmise that, yeah, that's what happening. Excuse me, that's what's happening. We're supporting a new direction that the data science team wants to explore.
Yeah, well, that's cool. So, talk to us about some of the metrics you use to measure the quality of your annotator's work. You talked about previously that sometimes it's hard to find good ones, or sometimes you hire some and then they turn out not to be, which I think we've seen that across all sorts of workforces. But how do you ensure the quality of the work that your annotators are doing?
Man, that you're drilling down into the right topics because being able to consistently deliver accurate data at scale, it just, in our experience, it can't be done without tight process controls. You have to be able to capture metrics at the annotator level and at the file iteration level, not just at the project level and the batch level.
Hmm,
And, like we talked about earlier, one of the reasons for that is they're costly, many of these projects. And so you need to get it right. You can't be delivering data that doesn't meet the data science team's objectives. For us, we focus at the annotator level and we put a lot of energy in that because, we want to turn our annotators into successful contributors because it takes a long time, as my colleague mentioned, I had mentioned earlier in the conversation, it takes a lot of time to get somebody up and running and proficient at the level we need them to be. So we pay very close attention to the quality of their work. So you asked about metrics. We capture things like, how long it's taking them to produce files, how many errors are made per file,
hmm,
the error types they're making per file, how long it takes their files to be processed by QA team members. And those kind of metrics let us gauge the performance of the annotators. And, it shows us where we need to do additional retraining.
interesting. Well, as I like to say, humans have errors too, right? We hold AI to a perfect standard, but humans have mistakes too. So it makes sense why you need a process to ensure the quality, even of humans, right?
Yeah.
So, what kind of tools do you use to manage this process? Are certain, I think there's two parts to this too, right? Managing the annotations, but also delivering the product to the end user.
Man, the tooling will make you or break you. I mean, it is one of the keys to project success is the tooling. And the reason is it has to be robust enough to manage projects at scale, including large numbers of annotators all working on concurrent projects, for example,
Mhm.
or different stages of projects at the same time, but yet able to capture data at a granular level on annotators and a variety of metrics. At the same time, it has to be agile enough to quickly spin up, new variations of the workflow as the project evolves. Um, and for the data science team, the bottom line is they just want good data. They don't they don't want to look inside of our black box
Sure.
necessarily, but at the same time, what they do want is a platform that's agile enough to give them the freedom to experiment and try different approaches, without bumping up against limitations in the platform's ability to, let's say, be retooled quickly, or retooled to accommodate some new variation of the project that they want to try.
Interesting. And is there a standard output that everyone wants, or do you dump a file to them? What's the approach there on as far as delivering the data and the quality annotated data?
Typically, it's a JSON,
Okay.
um, inbound and outbound. And one of the nice things about, you mentioned format. It's not always JSON. It can be configurable. In our case, we have our own proprietary platform. We developed it. We designed it ourselves. It's got an incredible engine for managing both interfacing and inbound and outbound.
Okay. Wow. Interesting. So, where do you see this going next for Xelex.ai? I mean, I think this is a really interesting solution. I must admit I didn't expect when I first met you, but I think it makes a lot of sense. So, what do you see next on the roadmap?
Seeing the amount of energy that's going into clinical summarization these days, we feel like that is going to be an important tool for the next couple of years. And I think, for people like me and you that have seen all of the different modalities that healthcare providers have tried over the last, 14, 15 years or so, since really the wide scale usage of EHR adoption. Um, a lot of them haven't worked or don't, they haven't really addressed the documentation burden effectively.
Hmm.
They really haven't addressed clinician burnout. And I think with large language model, we finally have a tool that has the ability to do that and the potential to do that. And so I think it's going to roll out to different specialties and to different types of notes and to different target markets, to different types of integrations into other applications. And we've got the passion and the skill to make a contribution to um, all that I think clinical summarization is going to become over the next couple of years. So that's one thing. I think another thing is we'd like to work more closely with data science teams, so that we can figure out how we can add more value to what they're working on.
I was thinking of an analogy of what you're doing. In so many of my interviews, I often say that data is the gold of healthcare. And
Hmm.
as I say that, and I think about our discussion today, I thought about, well, if data is the gold of healthcare, you're the one that burns out the impurities in that data and makes the gold actually useful. And
Hmm.
maybe I've watched History Channel too much and seen how they prepare the gold, right? But that's what it feels like. You're taking that gold of healthcare, which data is gold and valuable in healthcare, but you're taking it and making it so it's usable. So I think it's a
Hmm.
really interesting work that you're doing.
Hmm. Thanks, John.
Well, thanks so much for sharing these insights and perspectives and these, and all the work you're doing at Xalex. And thanks everyone for watching and listening. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com or search for Healthcare IT Today on your favorite podcast applications. Thanks, Mark.
Bye, John. Thank you.